My daughter-in-law asked me for my wife's medical credit card to book a month-long vacation to Dubai and the Maldives in first class. And when we refused, she turned my own son against me. I'm William Morgan, 65 years old. And I never thought I'd be sitting here in my empty kitchen at 3 in the morning, staring at my phone, wondering how my family fell apart over a piece of plastic. But here I am, and this is my story. It started 6 months ago when my wife Margaret was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. The doctors caught it early, thank God, but the treatments were expensive. Even with insurance, we were looking at thousands in out-of-pocket costs. Margaret, being the practical woman she's always been, applied for a medical credit card, one of those cards specifically designed for healthcare expenses with special financing options. "William," she said, holding the card when it arrived, "this is just for my treatments, nothing else." "We can't afford to mess around with our retirement savings," I agreed completely. At 65, I'm on a fixed income from my pension, and Margaret's 62, still working part-time at the local library. We've lived in our modest 2-bedroom house in suburban Ohio for 30 years, raised our son David here, and we're comfortable but not wealthy. Every dollar counts. David, our only child, is 35 now. He married Jessica 5 years ago, and honestly, I tried to like her. I really did. She's beautiful, I'll give her that. Blonde, always perfectly dressed, drives a brand new BMW that David somehow affords on his middle management salary. But from the beginning, something about her made me uncomfortable. The way she looked at our house like it was beneath her. The way she'd make little comments about how David deserved better things. "Dad, you should really update this kitchen," she'd say, running her manicured finger along our perfectly functional but outdated countertops. "David grew up here. Don't you want him to feel proud bringing friends over?" Margaret would squeeze my hand under the table, her way of telling me to let it go. And I did, for David's sake. The first real incident happened 3 months ago, right after Margaret started her chemotherapy. Jessica called me directly, which was unusual since she typically only spoke to David. "William," she said, her voice sweet as honey, "I was wondering if Margaret might let me use her medical card for a little procedure I need done." "What kind of procedure?" I asked. "Well, it's cosmetic surgery, actually. A breast augmentation. I know it's not technically medical, but some doctors code it differently, and I stopped her right there. Jessica, that card is specifically for Margaret's cancer treatment. We can't use it for anything else." The sweetness in her voice evaporated instantly. "I can't believe you'd deny me something so small when David and I have been so supportive during Margaret's illness." Supportive? They'd visited exactly twice since the diagnosis, both times staying less than an hour, and Jessica spent most of that time on her phone. "The answer is no," I said firmly. She hung up without another word. David called an hour later. "Dad, Jessica's really hurt. She was just asking for help, and you made her feel like some kind of criminal. Son, that money is for your mother's medical bills. You know how tight things are right now. It's just a credit card. Dad, it's not like you're giving her cash." I tried to explain how credit works, how we'd be responsible for paying it back. But David had already made up his mind that I was being unreasonable. The conversation ended badly, with him saying maybe they'd visit less often if we weren't going to be family about things. Margaret was in the kitchen when I hung up, her head wrapped in the colorful scarf she wore to hide her hair loss. She'd heard the whole conversation. "I'm sorry, honey," she said, reaching for my hand. "I never thought this card would cause problems." "It's not your fault," I told her. "We're doing the right thing." But the problems were just beginning. 2 weeks later, Margaret discovered that someone had been using her card. Small charges at first, $50 here, $100 there, all at high-end spas and boutiques. When she called the credit card company, they said the purchases were made with the physical card, not online. Margaret was devastated. "William, I swear I never gave anyone this card. I keep it in my purse, and my purse never leaves my sight." We started thinking back, trying to remember when someone might have had access. Then Margaret remembered Jessica offering to get her purse from the car during their last visit. How she'd been gone for almost 15 minutes. "She must have written down the numbers," Margaret said, tears in her eyes. "Or taken a picture." I was furious. I called David immediately. "Dad, you're being paranoid," he said. "Jessica wouldn't do something like that." "Then how do you explain these charges?" "Maybe Mom wrote down the number somewhere and forgot. She's been pretty scattered since the chemo started." I couldn't believe my own son was suggesting his mother, who balanced our checkbook to the penny every month for 40 years, was somehow losing her mind. "David, these charges are at places your mother has never been to, for things she would never buy. $200 facials, luxury handbags. I'll ask Jessica about it, okay? But you need to stop accusing her of things." He never called back with an answer. Margaret cancelled the card and got a new one, this time keeping it locked in our bedroom safe. But the damage to our relationship with David was already done. His calls became less frequent, his visits even. It was a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks ago. Margaret was at her oncologist appointment, and I was home alone when my phone rang. David's number. "Dad," he said, and his voice sounded different, strained. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about it." "What is it, son?" "Jessica and I want to take a trip. We've been under a lot of stress lately, and we think getting away would be good for us. For our marriage." I waited, sensing there was more. "The thing is, we found this amazing deal. A month in Dubai and the Maldives. First-class flights, 7-star resorts, the whole experience. But it's expensive, and our credit cards are maxed out from some investments that didn't pan out." My heart sank. I knew what was coming. We were hoping maybe Mom could put it on her medical card. I know it sounds crazy, but Jessica did some research. And apparently some doctors classify luxury travel as therapeutic for mental health. We could probably get it coded as treatment for stress and anxiety. I was speechless. Here was my son asking me to commit what amounted to fraud so his wife could take a month-long luxury vacation while his mother was fighting cancer. "David," I said slowly, "your mother is using every available penny of that credit limit for her treatment. Even if what you're suggesting was legal, which it's not, we don't have the credit available. How much is left on the card?" I shouldn't have answered, but this was my son. "About $8,000. The trip costs $12,000. We'd only need you to put $8 on the card, and we'd cover the rest. Son, that $8,000 is for your mother's final rounds of chemotherapy and radiation. Without it, she'll have to delay treatment." There was a long pause. Then David said something that broke my heart. "Dad, Mom's going to be fine. The doctor said they caught it early. But Jessica and I might not survive if we don't get some time away from all this stress. This could save our marriage." "What stress, David? You barely visit. You barely call. That's not fair. This whole cancer thing has been hard on everyone. The cancer thing. Like it was an inconvenience his mother had chosen. The answer is no," I said. "Dad, please. Just think about it." "Talk to Mom." "I don't need to think about it, and I'm not going to ask your mother to choose between her health and your vacation." Another long pause. Then in a voice I'd never heard from my son before, cold and calculating, "Fine, but don't blame us if this affects our relationship." And then he hung up. I sat in my kitchen for an hour after that call, staring at the family photos on our refrigerator. Pictures of David as a baby, as a little boy, graduating high school, his wedding day. When had I lost him? When had the sweet, caring son I raised become someone who would ask his dying mother to pay for his wife's luxury vacation? That evening, when Margaret came home exhausted from her treatment, I almost didn't tell her about the call. But we'd never kept secrets from each other in 43 years of marriage, she cried. Not the angry tears I expected, but heartbroken, defeated tears. I feel like I'm losing my son and my health at the same time, she whispered. I held her while she cried, and I made a decision. I was going to protect my wife, no matter what it cost me. The next morning, Margaret called the credit card company and changed all the passwords and security information. She also added a note to the account that only she was authorized to make changes or charges. That afternoon, David called. Not me this time, Margaret. I only heard her side of the conversation, but it was enough. No, honey, I can't help you with that. Because it's for my medical treatment. David, please don't ask me to choose between your vacation and my health. I love you, but the answer is no. When she hung up, she was shaking. He said Jessica is devastated, Margaret told me, that they had their hearts set on this trip. And now I'm ruining their chance to fix their marriage. Their marriage problems aren't your responsibility to solve. I said. He asked if I was sure the cancer wasn't affecting my judgment. I felt something inside me break. My son had essentially asked his mother if cancer was making her crazy for refusing to pay for his luxury vacation. That was a week ago. Since then, David has called twice, both times asking if we'd reconsidered helping them with their trip. Each time, Margaret has said no, and each time, David has gotten a little colder. Yesterday morning, Margaret got a text message from Jessica. Just 4 words. Thanks for nothing, Margaret. Last night, David called one final time. Dad, he said, I want you to know that Jessica and I have decided to take a break from family visits for a while. We feel like you and Mom aren't being supportive during a difficult time in our lives. What about being supportive during a difficult time in your mother's life? I asked. Mom's going to beat this cancer. Everyone knows that. But some things can't be fixed once they're broken. And then he hung up. So here I am at 3 a.m, wondering how my son became someone I don't recognize. Wondering how a piece of plastic meant to save my wife's life became the thing that destroyed our family. Margaret doesn't know about that last conversation yet. She's sleeping upstairs, and tomorrow she has another treatment. I'll drive her there, hold her hand while they pump poison into her veins to kill the cancer, and I'll pretend everything is okay. But nothing is okay. My son has chosen his wife's vacation over his mother's health, and if you're finding this story as heartbreaking as I am living it, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share these real stories that need to be heard. The morning after David's final call, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to fight for my family, even if it meant risking what was left of my relationship with my son. I waited until Margaret left for her part-time shift at the library. She'd been insisting on working despite the fatigue from chemotherapy, saying it kept her mind off everything else. I think she also needed the escape from the tension that had settled over our house, like a dark cloud. Once she was gone, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called Jessica directly. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "William, this is a surprise. Jessica, we need to talk." Oh, the cheerfulness evaporated. If this is about the trip again, I really don't think there's anything more to discuss. Actually, there is. I want to understand something. Help me make sense of this whole situation. I could hear her moving around, probably pacing. Jessica was always in motion when she was nervous. "Okay," she said cautiously. "You're asking my wife, who is fighting cancer, to pay for your luxury vacation. A vacation that costs more than most people make in 3 months. I'm trying to understand how you think that's reasonable. William, you're making it sound worse than it is. It's not like we're asking for cash. It's just a credit card, and we'd pay it back eventually." "Eventually? With what money?" "David told me your credit cards are already maxed out." There was a pause. "David shouldn't have told you that. Jessica, I'm David's father. I've known him for 35 years. I know when he's hiding something. What investments went wrong? Another pause, longer this time. I don't see how that's your business. It becomes my business when you're asking my sick wife to pay your bills. We're not asking her to pay our bills. Her voice was rising now, losing that controlled sweetness. We're asking for help with one trip, one experience that could save our marriage. What's wrong with your marriage that a vacation would fix? That's personal, not when you're making it my family's problem. I could hear her breathing getting faster. Jessica didn't like being challenged. Fine, she said. You want to know? David's been distant lately. Ever since your wife got sick, actually. He's been stressed and depressed, and it's affecting our relationship. We barely talk anymore. We haven't been intimate in months. This trip was supposed to be a chance to reconnect, to remember why we fell in love, and you can't do that without spending $12,000. You wouldn't understand. You and Margaret have your little, simple life, your little, simple house, your little, simple dreams. Some of us want more than that. The mask was coming off now. This was the Jessica I'd always suspected was there, hiding behind the smiles and the small talk. Our little, simple life, I repeated. You mean the life where we've been married for 43 years? Where we've supported each other through everything? Where I'm not asking someone else's sick mother to pay for my problems? God, you're so self-righteous. Do you know what it's like being married to David? He's so boring, so content with mediocrity. Just like his parents. Something cold settled in my chest. Jessica, are you saying you married my son for his money? I married David because I thought he had potential. I thought he'd want to build something bigger than this suburban nothing life you raised him in. What happened to the investments? What? You said your credit cards are maxed out from investments that didn't pan out. What investments? She was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Jessica, it wasn't investments, she said finally, her voice small. What was it? Shopping. Credit card debt. I have a spending problem, okay? Are you happy now? The pieces were starting to fall into place. How much debt? $40,000. I felt like I'd been punched. $40,000 on what? Clothes, jewelry, the car payments, dinners, trips. It adds up. Does David know? He knows some of it. Not all of it. And you thought a vacation to Dubai was the solution. I thought if we could get away, if I could show him the kind of life we could have, maybe he'd be motivated to work harder, make more money. I was speechless. This woman had buried my son in debt, lied to him about it, and now wanted my cancer-stricken wife to finance her fantasy life. Jessica, I said slowly, you need professional help. This isn't normal behavior. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me, she snapped, the sweetness completely gone now. You have no idea what it's like being married to your son. Then why don't you tell me? He's weak, William. Just like you, content with nothing, happy with scraps. I married him thinking I could change him, but he's too much like his father. The insult hit, but I was more worried about my son than my own feelings. Does David know you feel this way about him? Of course not. I'm not cruel. You're asking his mother to pay for your vacation while she's dying. She's not dying. Everyone says the cancer is treatable. Stop being so dramatic. Jessica, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Margaret's credit card is off limits, period. If you love my son, you'll get help for your spending problem and find a way to deal with your debt that doesn't involve exploiting sick people. Or what? Or I'll make sure David knows exactly what kind of person he married. You wouldn't dare. He'd never believe you anyway. He loves me. Try me. She hung up. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that call, feeling sick. Not just because of what Jessica had revealed, but because of what it meant for David. My son was married to someone who saw him as weak, who had buried him in debt, who was manipulating him into asking his dying mother for money, and David had no idea. That afternoon, when Margaret came home from work, I almost told her about the conversation. But she looked so tired, so fragile, that I couldn't bring myself to add another burden to her shoulders. "How was your day, honey?" she asked, settling into her favorite chair. "Quiet," I said. "How was the library?" "Good. Mrs. Henderson asked about you. She said to tell you she's praying for us." Mrs. Henderson had been our neighbor for 20 years. She was one of the few people who knew about Margaret's diagnosis. Most of our friends didn't know, yet Margaret wanted to wait until the treatment was over before telling people. That's kind of her. Margaret studied my face. After 43 years, she could read me like a book. "William, what's wrong? And don't say nothing. You have that look you get when you're worrying about something. I considered lying, but I'd never been good at it. Not with Margaret. I called Jessica today. Her face changed immediately." "Oh, William, why?" "I wanted to understand how she could ask such a thing of you. I thought maybe if I could make her see reason." "What did she say?" "I told her everything. The debt, Jessica's feelings about David, her view of our simple life. With each revelation, Margaret's face grew paler. "That poor boy," she whispered when I finished. "He has no idea, does he?" "I don't think so." Margaret was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at our small backyard, where David used to play as a child. "We have to tell him," she said finally. "Margaret, he won't believe us. You heard how he defended her about the credit card charges. Then we'll find proof." "What kind of proof?" She looked at me with determination I hadn't seen since before the cancer diagnosis. "I don't know yet. But our son is being manipulated by someone who doesn't love him, someone who's using him. We can't just stand by and watch." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about David, about the sweet little boy who used to climb into our bed during thunderstorms, who cried when we had to put down our old dog Rex, who called me every Sunday when he first moved out just to check in. When had Jessica started isolating him from us? When had our weekly Sunday calls become monthly, then every few months, then only on holidays? I started remembering things. How Jessica always seemed to have somewhere else they needed to be when we suggested family dinners. How she'd gotten David that expensive watch for his birthday, the one he seemed uncomfortable wearing. How she'd convinced him they needed to move to that expensive apartment across town, farther from us. At 2 a.m, I got up and went to David's old room. We'd kept it mostly the same trophies from high school baseball, posters of his favorite bands, a bookshelf full of the science fiction novels he used to devour. On his desk was a photo of the 3 of us from his college graduation. He looked so happy, so proud. So much like the son I remembered. That's when I decided Margaret was right. We had to fight for him, even if it meant risking what was left of our relationship. Because that wasn't really David who'd called, asking for vacation money. That was someone Jessica had molded, someone trapped in debt and lies and manipulation. The real David, my son, was still in there somewhere, and I was going to find him. The next morning, I made a decision that would either save my family or destroy it completely. I was going to David's apartment. Margaret was at another treatment session. She'd insisted I didn't need to come to this one, said she could manage the short drive alone. I think she knew I needed to do something, needed to act, instead of just sitting around feeling helpless. David lived in Riverside Heights, a trendy complex about 30 minutes from our house. The kind of place with a gym and a pool that cost twice what our mortgage used to be. I'd only been there a handful of times. Jessica always seemed uncomfortable having us over, said the place was too small for entertaining. I didn't call ahead. I knew David would be at work, but I was hoping Jessica might be home. I needed to see her again, face to face, without David there to translate everything into the version she wanted him to hear. The parking lot was full of luxury cars, BMWs, Mercedes, even a couple of Porsches. I found Jessica's white BMW in its assigned spot and parked beside it. She was home, I took the elevator to the 4th floor, my heart pounding. I hadn't felt this nervous since asking Margaret to marry me 44 years ago. I knocked on door 4B. After a moment I heard movement inside, then Jessica's voice. "David, did you forget your key again?" "It's William," I called out. Silence, then the sound of locks being undone. The door opened just a crack, held by the security chain. "What are you doing here?" Jessica's eye appeared in the gap. "I came to talk to you. Without David here to filter everything, this is inappropriate. You can't just show up at our home." "Our home? Who's paying the rent, Jessica?" Her eye narrowed. "That's none of your business. It is when you're asking my wife to subsidize your lifestyle." She closed the door. I heard the chain sliding, then it opened again. "Fine, come in. But make it quick." The apartment was beautiful, I had to admit. High ceilings, expensive furniture, artwork that probably cost more than our car. But it felt cold, like a showroom rather than a home. There were no family photos, no personal touches that spoke of David. "Nice place," I said. "Thank you." She was wearing yoga pants and a designer top. Her hair perfectly styled even though it was barely 10 in the morning. "Would you like something to drink?" "No, thank you. I want to talk about David." She gestured to the leather couch. "Sit." I remained standing. "How much does David know about your debt?" "I told you yesterday he knows some of it." "How much is some?" She perched on the edge of a chair, her posture rigid. "About 15,000. So he doesn't know about the other 25,000. It's complicated. It's lying. I was protecting him. David doesn't handle stress well. If he knew the full amount, he'd what? Leave you?" Her face flushed. "He'd panic, make rash decisions. I know my husband better than you do you? Because the David I raised was always honest, even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult. The David you raised was also passive and unambitious. The David I raised was content and grateful. There's a difference." Jessica stood up abruptly, began pacing to the window. "Do you know what it's like being married to someone with no drive? No vision for the future? I know what it's like being married to someone who loves you unconditionally." She whipped around. "Love doesn't pay bills, William. Neither do luxury vacations to Dubai. That trip wasn't about luxury. It was about showing David what life could be like if he applied himself, if he stopped being satisfied with mediocrity." I looked around the expensive apartment. "Seems like David's been applying himself plenty. This place must cost 3,000 a month, 3,500. My heart sank. David's salary couldn't possibly cover their expenses, not with that kind of rent and the debt Jessica had accumulated. "How do you afford this?" "We manage." "With what money, Jessica?" "David makes 60,000 a year. After taxes, that's maybe 45,000 take-home. This apartment alone costs more than half his salary." She was quiet, staring out the window. "Jessica, how are you paying for this lifestyle?" "Credit cards," she said quietly. "You're living on borrowed money. All of it. It's temporary. David's up for a promotion, and if he doesn't get it—" "He will, but if he doesn't?" She turned back to me, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. "Real fear, I don't know," she whispered. I felt a surge of something I wasn't expecting, pity. This woman had created an impossible situation, not just for herself, but for my son. "Jessica, you need to tell David the truth." "All of it?" "I can't." "Why?" "Because he'll leave me." There it was. The real truth behind all the manipulation, all the lies. "Maybe," I said, "but maybe he'll surprise you. Maybe he'll want to help you figure this out. You don't understand. I'm not the person he thinks I am." I sat down on the couch then, suddenly feeling very tired. "What do you mean?" She came and sat across from me, and for the first time since I'd known her, Jessica looked vulnerable. "I grew up poor, William. Really poor. Food stamps, thrift store clothes, never knowing if we'd have electricity next month, poor. I swore I'd never live like that again. There's nothing wrong with wanting a better life. I lied to David about my background. Told him my family was middle class, that my father was a businessman instead of a janitor. I created this whole fake history because I was ashamed. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, and then I met David, and he was so kind, so genuine. He loved me for who I pretended to be, but I was terrified that if he knew the real me, the girl from the trailer park who used to steal food from grocery stores, he'd leave. So you started spending money to prove you belonged in his world. I started spending money to become the person I told him I was. The clothes, the car, this apartment, it was all part of the lie. I was beginning to understand. Jessica wasn't just materialistic, she was terrified. Terrified of being found out. Terrified of losing the life she'd built on deception. Jessica, David fell in love with you. Not your background. How do you know? Because I know my son. He's never cared about money or status. Hell, he drove that beat-up Honda through college and was proud of it. That's what scares me. If he doesn't care about nice things, what does he see in me? Maybe you should ask him. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I can't, it's too late. I'm in too deep. It's never too late to tell the truth. Easy for you to say. You've been married to the same woman for 40 years. You don't know what it's like starting over at 30. I know what it's like watching my son become someone I don't recognize. She flinched. What do you mean? The David who called asking for vacation money while his mother is fighting cancer, that's not my son. That's someone who's been manipulated into believing his wife's wants are more important than his mother's needs. I never told him to choose between us, didn't you? Every time you make him feel guilty for visiting us, every time you schedule something else during family events, every time you make little comments about our simple life. And she was quiet. Jessica, I came here to tell you to stay away from my wife's medical money. But now I think you need more help than I realized. What kind of help? Therapy, financial counseling. And you need to tell David everything. He'll leave me. Maybe. Or maybe he'll help you figure out how to build a real life together, instead of this fantasy that's drowning you both. She was crying again, harder now. I don't know how to stop, she whispered. Stop what? Spending, lying, being someone I'm not. It's like I'm addicted to being fake. I moved to sit beside her on the chair. Jessica, my wife is fighting for her life. Every day she gets up and faces something that could kill her, and she does it with grace and courage. If she can fight cancer, you can fight this. But what if David doesn't forgive me? What if he does? She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the scared girl from the trailer park, instead of the polished woman who'd been manipulating my family. Would you help me tell him, if you promise me something? What? That you'll get professional help? And that you'll never again ask my wife for money while she's fighting for her life? I promise. And Jessica, no more lies. If you're going to save your marriage, it has to be built on truth. She nodded, wiping her eyes. That evening Margaret was waiting for me when I got home. How did it go? She asked. I told her everything. About Jessica's background, her fears, her promises. Do you think she meant it? Margaret asked. I don't know, but I think she's scared enough to try. And David? We'll find out soon enough. She's going to tell him everything tonight. Margaret took my hand. Whatever happens, we tried to help them. I just hope we haven't made things worse. At 11 o'clock that night, my phone rang. David's number, I answered on the second ring. Dad, David's voice was shaking. We need to talk. Before I share what happened in that conversation, I want to know where you're listening from. Are you in the United States like us? Somewhere else? Leave a comment and let me... Dad, David said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jessica told me everything. I could hear crying in the background, her, I assumed. Where are you, son? We're in the car. Parked outside your house, actually. We've been sitting here for an hour. I didn't know if you'd want to see me. My heart broke. Of course I want to see you. Come inside. Are you sure? After everything I said to you and Mom. David, you're my son. Come inside. 5 minutes later, Margaret and I were sitting across from David and Jessica in our living room. David looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. His eyes were red, his hair disheveled. Jessica looked even worse, mascara streaked down her face, her hands shaking. I owe you both an apology, David began. A huge apology. Son, I started. Now let me say this, please. He took a shaky breath. I asked my mother, who is fighting cancer, to pay for our luxury vacation. I actually said those words out loud, thought they were reasonable, defended them when you said no. I don't know who I've become, but it's not the person you raised. Margaret reached across the coffee table and took his hand. Honey, you're here now. That's what matters. I'm $40,000 in debt, he said, his voice cracking. 40,000. And I didn't even know it. David, Jessica tried to speak. No, he said firmly. I need to tell them. He looked back at us. For 2 years I've been living a lie. This apartment, the car, the dinners, the clothes, everything was borrowed money, and I was too stupid to see it. You weren't stupid, I said. You were trusting your wife. I was willfully blind. The signs were all there. Jessica handling all our finances, never wanting to talk about money, always having new things but vague explanations about where they came from. I chose not to ask questions because I liked the life she was building for us. He stood up and began pacing, a habit he'd had since childhood when he was upset. Do you know what the worst part is? While you, Mom, were getting chemotherapy, I was worried about disappointing Jessica. While you were losing your hair and fighting for your life, I was more concerned about her feelings than yours. David, stop, Margaret said gently. You're being too hard on yourself. Am I? I chose her over you, over both of you. When she said you were being unreasonable about the credit card, I believed her instead of trusting my own parents. Jessica, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. It's my fault, she said, her voice barely audible. All of it. David, your parents, I'm so sorry. She looked up at Margaret. Mrs. Morgan, I asked you to pay for our vacation while you're fighting cancer. I can't even believe I'm the kind of person who would do that. Margaret studied Jessica's face. After a moment, she said, Tell me why. Why what? Why you did it. Help me understand. Jessica glanced at David, who nodded encouragingly. I was terrified, she said. Terrified that David would see through the person I'd pretended to be. I grew up with nothing, and I lied to him about my background because I was ashamed. Then I started spending money to maintain the lie, to be the person I'd told him I was. She wiped her nose with a tissue. The debt kept growing, and I kept thinking I could fix it somehow. The vacation wasn't really about saving our marriage. It was about buying more time before everything fell apart. And using my medical card? I convinced myself it wasn't really stealing because we'd pay it back eventually. But that's not true, is it? We can't pay it back. We can barely make minimum payments on what we already owe. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised all of us. She got up and sat next to Jessica on the couch. Honey, how old are you? 29. I'm 62. Do you know what I was doing when I was 29? Jessica shook her head, making mistakes, big ones. I maxed out 3 credit cards, buying things I thought would make William love me more. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, a car I couldn't afford. I was convinced that if I could just be impressive enough, he'd never leave me. David looked shocked. Mom, I never knew that. It was before you were born. William and I had only been married 2 years, and I was so insecure. I thought he'd married beneath him. I was a librarian, he had a college degree, and a good job. I was sure he'd realize his mistake and find someone better. She took Jessica's hand. The debt nearly destroyed us. We had to sell the car, move to a tiny apartment, eat ramen noodles for 6 months. But you know what saved us? What? Jessica whispered. Truth. I finally told William everything, and instead of leaving me, he helped me fix it. Not the money that took years to pay off, but the real problem, which was that I didn't believe I was worth loving just as I was. I remembered those early years, how scared Margaret had been, how hard we'd worked together to rebuild our finances and her self-confidence. I'd never connected it to what Jessica was going through now. The difference, Margaret continued, is that I told William the truth before I asked his dying mother to pay for my mistakes. Jessica flinched. I know how awful that was. Do you? Because I want to make sure you understand what you asked of me. I've 8 weeks of treatment left. 8 weeks to kill whatever cancer cells might still be hiding in my body. The money on that card represents my chance to complete treatment without having to choose between my health and our retirement savings. Jessica was crying again. I'm so sorry. I believe you are. But sorry doesn't undo the damage. David has been carrying guilt about disappointing you while his mother was fighting for her life. Do you understand how that changed him? Yes, Jessica whispered. Margaret looked at David. And you, young man, need to understand something too. Your wife made mistakes, but you enabled them. Every time you chose not to ask difficult questions, every time you let her isolate you from your family, every time you prioritized her comfort over our relationship, you made choices too. David nodded, tears in his eyes. I know, Mom. I don't know how to make it right. By starting over, I said. Both of you. What do you mean? Jessica asked. I mean, you get help, real help. Financial counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. You figure out who you really are, Jessica, and decide if that person is someone David can love. And David, you decide if you can forgive her and build something real together. And if we can't, David asked, then at least you'll know you tried, Margaret said. But right now you're not even trying. You're just maintaining a lie that's destroying everyone who cares about you. David sat back down and took Jessica's other hand. I want to try. I want to know who you really are, not the person you think I want you to be. Even if she's not impressive, I asked. Even if she's just a normal person with normal problems. Dad, look at this mess. How much less impressive could she be than someone who lies to her husband and asks his dying mother for vacation money? It wasn't said cruelly, but Jessica winced anyway. I deserve that, she said. You deserve a chance to do better, Margaret corrected. We all do. Over the next 2 hours, we talked about practical things. David and Jessica would move out of the expensive apartment and find something they could actually afford. Jessica would see a therapist and a financial counselor. David would take control of their finances, at least until they could trust each other again. What about your family? I asked Jessica. Your real family? I haven't spoken to them in 3 years. They don't even know I'm married. Maybe it's time to fix that too. As they were getting ready to leave, David hugged me tighter than he had since he was a little boy. Dad, I'm so sorry. For all of it. I know, son. We'll get through this. What if Jessica can't change? What if she can't stop lying and spending? I looked at his wife, who was saying goodbye to Margaret. Then you'll have to decide what kind of life you want. But give her a chance to try. After they left, Margaret and I sat in our quiet kitchen. Do you think they'll make it? She asked. I don't know. But at least now they have a chance. I'm proud of you for going to see her today. I'm proud of you for being kinder to her than she deserved. Margaret smiled. She's just a scared kid, William. A scared kid who made terrible choices, but still just a kid. And David? David is our son. He lost his way for a while, but he found his way back. 3 days later, David called to tell us they'd found a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town. The rent was less than half what they'd been paying. A week after that, Jessica called Margaret directly to apologize again and to tell her she'd had her first appointment with a therapist. "She says I have something called financial trauma," Jessica told Margaret, "from growing up poor. She thinks that's why I can't stop spending money I don't have." "That makes sense," Margaret said. "Are you going to keep seeing her?" Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Because hating you wouldn't have helped, David, and David is what matters to me. I'm going to prove I can change." "Don't prove it to me, honey. Prove it to yourself." 2 months later, Margaret rang the bell to end her cancer treatments. I was there with her, holding her hand as the nurse removed the IV for the last time. The oncology staff cheered, and Margaret cried happy tears for the first time since her diagnosis. "How do you feel, Mrs. Morgan?" asked Dr. Patterson, her oncologist. "Grateful," she said simply. "David and Jessica met us at home with flowers and a homemade dinner. Jessica had cooked something simple, spaghetti and salad, but she'd made it herself instead of ordering from an expensive restaurant." "How are things going?" Margaret asked as we sat around our kitchen table. "Better," David said. "Harder, but better." Their new apartment was a 40-minute drive from our house, in an older complex without a gym or a pool. But it was clean and affordable, and for the first time in years, David seemed relaxed. "I got promoted at work," he told us. "Not the big promotion Jessica was hoping for, but a good one. It comes with a $5,000 raise. That's wonderful, son. The best part is I can actually pay our bills with my salary now. No more credit cards for basic expenses." Jessica had been quiet during dinner, but she looked healthier somehow, less frantic. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she was wearing jeans and a regular t-shirt instead of designer clothes. "How's therapy going?" I asked her. "Hard," she said. "Really hard. Dr. Kim makes me talk about things I've been avoiding my whole life." "Like what?" She glanced at David, who nodded encouragingly. "Like why I think I have to earn love by being perfect. Like why I'm so afraid of people seeing the real me that I'd rather go into debt than be honest. And what are you learning? That the real me isn't as awful as I thought. And that David—" She reached for his hand. "David actually likes me better without all the pretending." "It's true," David said. "I was getting exhausted trying to keep up with the person you thought I wanted you to be." After dinner, Jessica helped Margaret clean up, while David and I sat on the back porch. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything. How did you know Mom was the right person for you?" "I thought about it. I didn't, not at first, but I knew she was real. Even when she was making those financial mistakes early in our marriage, even when she was scared and insecure, she was always authentically herself. Jessica's trying to be real now, but sometimes I wonder if it's too late, if too much damage has been done. What does your gut tell you?" "That I want to try. That the person she's becoming is someone I could build a real life with. Then try. What if she can't change? What if this is just another performance? Then you'll know. But David, you can't go into this expecting her to fail. If you do, she will." Through the kitchen window, I could see Jessica and Margaret talking while they loaded the dishwasher. Jessica was laughing at something Margaret had said, a real laugh, not the careful, controlled sound I was used to hearing from her. "She's different with Mom now," David observed. "How so?" "She's not trying so hard to impress her. It's like she finally figured out that Mom was never the enemy. Your mother likes her better this way, too." "Really? Really?" Margaret always said she could see a good person hiding under all that fear and pretending. 6 months after Margaret's last treatment, we got the call we'd been hoping for. Her latest scans were clear. No signs of cancer anywhere in her body. We celebrated with a family dinner at our house. Nothing fancy, just burgers on the grill and homemade apple pie. But it felt like the most luxurious meal we'd ever shared. "I have some news," Jessica announced as we were finishing dessert. We all looked at her expectantly. "I got a job." "That's wonderful," Margaret said. "Doing what?" "Working at a non-profit that helps people with debt problems. It's not much money, but I can use my experience to help other people avoid the mistakes I made." David beamed with pride. "She's already helped 3 families restructure their debt." "It feels good," Jessica said. "Helping instead of just taking. I'm proud of you," I told her, and I meant it. Later that evening, as David and Jessica were getting ready to leave, Jessica approached me privately. "William, I want you to know something." "What's that?" "I'll never forget what I asked of you and Margaret. I'll carry that shame for the rest of my life." "Jessica, no, let me finish. But I also want you to know that asking for that money was the lowest point of my life. And sometimes the lowest point is where you have to go before you can start climbing back up. You've come a long way. I have further to go. But for the first time in my life, I'm not running from who I am. Who are you?" She smiled. "I'm Jessica Morgan. I grew up poor, I made terrible financial mistakes, and I nearly destroyed my marriage with lies. But I'm also someone who's learning to tell the truth, even when it's hard. That's all any of us can do." As I write this, it's been a year since Margaret completed her treatment. She's cancer-free, back to working full-time at the library, and stronger than ever. David and Jessica are still married, still working on building something real together. They've paid off $15,000 of their debt, and Jessica hasn't used a credit card in 8 months. Last Sunday, they came over for dinner and stayed for 4 hours. We played cards, looked at old photo albums, and Jessica told us stories about her childhood, the real stories, not the fake ones she used to tell. "I wish I could go back and tell that scared little girl in the trailer park that she was worthy of love just as she was," she said. "You can't go back," Margaret told her. "But you can make sure other scared little girls don't make the same mistakes." "Is that what you're doing at the non-profit?" "Every day. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for what happened. Not the part where my sick wife was asked to pay for someone else's luxury vacation that was unforgivable, but the part where it forced our family to confront some hard truths about love, money, and what really matters. My son learned that enabling someone's lies isn't the same as loving them. My daughter-in-law learned that being authentic is less exhausting than being perfect. And I learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need our help the most." Margaret, as always, was the wisest of all of us. She knew from the beginning that Jessica was just a scared girl making terrible choices. She also knew that David had to find his own way back to us, that we couldn't force him to see what he wasn't ready to see. If you've made it this far in my story, you know that families are complicated. Money makes them more complicated. But love, real love, the kind that tells hard truths and sets boundaries and refuses to enable destructive behavior, that kind of love can survive almost anything. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to choose truth over comfort, authenticity over perfection. And remember, whether you're the person asking for help, the person being asked, or the person watching it all unfold, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring about our family, even when we were at our worst. Your support means everything to people like us, who are just trying to figure out how to love each other better. Until next time, this is William Morgan, reminding you that every family has a story worth telling, and every story has the power to heal.